What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Phillies lose 2 out of 3 over the weekend to the Atlanta Braves. Anthony, it was what I would call a predictable result. I think both you and I, going into the weekend, felt that the Phillies probably were not going to win the series. And I think 3-3 without Schwarber, Realmuto, Harper, your number 5 starters, you say, okay, like they did essentially what I think any reasonable fan would ask of them, which is survive, tread water. Don't let Atlanta get super hot and really close in on you. And they've managed to basically just shave a week off the season here. No harm, no foul. Yet, they still managed to. The cops just follow you around.
They must follow. I'm not even home. I'm not even home
today, and
the cops are following me around.
They're poking around you. I mean, look, it was still an annoying weekend. They played 2 non-competitive games to close things out in Atlanta. Ranger Suarez was, I don't know, he was not great. Michael Mercado was horrible. Didn't give him a chance. And then the offense combines for 1 run over 2 days. So you have plenty to complain about here today, and just I'll bring you in. And where do you want to start?
No, I mean, look, there are things that are worth talking about from a perspective. But overall, I think the first thing I wanted to say is exactly what you said to start off the show, and it's kind of what we said on Monday last week when we did the show leading into the week last Monday, that 3-3, you would accepted 2-4 because of the road trip and how depleted you were. 3-3 would be solid, and anything better than that would be a bonus. So they got to the solid. They did the solid, right? They got the 3-3. I thought Friday night's game, the offense did a nice job. They got a little help from the Braves butchering some stuff in the field. But overall, Trey Turner with very nice, the home runs, keep coming from him, which is great. They got a little bit of production from the bottom of the lineup, which you rarely get with this group, especially against Max Fried. So that was a good thing. So there were some positives from that game. It's Saturday and Sunday that I think, though, that everybody's going to focus on, and probably rightfully so, because there are questions that have emerged from Saturday and Sunday. And it's not that the Braves dominated them, even though the scores were 5-1 and 6-0. They were just there are a couple of big innings that the Braves had and one in each game that kind of make the difference in those games. But the Phillies' lack of ability to hit with runners in scoring position in those games, they had a few chances. Ranger Suarez, obviously, we got to get into him because he's now not looking like the Ranger Suarez he was prior to getting hit on the hand. I'm not sure that that's the reason, but I'm just saying that's kind of like the breaking point from when he was a dominant pitcher to where he is now. And then, getting no production out of the number 5 spot in the rotation since the injury. So it's really kind of a unique spot for the Phillies to be in. But I'm not somebody who's going to suddenly hit the panic button. You still have an 8-game lead on July the 8th. Best record in baseball. So
you do have an 8-game lead on July the 8th, and you do have at least one of your key pieces coming back, presumably this week against the Dodgers. And we'll get to all that in a minute. I realize it's something we've mentioned before, that baseball in this city has really become football. Every game is huge. Every game matters. Yeah. Every game is amplified. And so it's not really a surprise when you have the rivalry, we'll call it, between the Phillies and Braves, and they don't play well, to look around and hear some people call into radio shows, certainly open up social media, and you see tweets like, this team's in trouble, or this team is screwed. And I don't really understand that. I don't know why people were necessarily surprised by what happened this weekend. Like, at some point, it's great that they got off to a nice 5-2 start in those first 7 games without Schwarber and Harper, plus obviously the lingering Realmuto injury, but it catches up with you. Like, you can hold it down for a while. You can piece it together for a few games, but over time, when you move those pieces out of your lineup, it's going to get you, and it's certainly going to get you on the road against a team like the Braves, who I know haven't been world beaters this year, but they're still pretty damn good. And by the way, it's a team that has a great regular season pedigree, who was essentially playing this weekend to stay alive, to stay in the conversation in the division. So you're playing a very motivated team as well. But it's back up against the wall. So I don't know why people are like, oh, this team's in a lot of trouble. And I do want to kind of navigate some of the issues, though, because I'm also not sitting here today trying to wave the red pom-poms either. But I will just put it in perspective. You go, and I know you hate these things. I get it. But you go to Baseball Reference this morning, and the most likely outcome is that the Phillies win 98 games based on their projections, and they have an 87.6% chance to win the National League East this morning, which may not mean a damn thing come the final day of the regular season, but it's just to try to offer up some perspective that overall the Phillies are still in a very good position here, and they are about to get healthier. So if you're one of those fans today that's like, they're screwed, or that's the real Phillies, or they came up small with a chance to stomp on the Braves. Like if the Phillies had Schwarber, Harper, and Real Muto in the lineup, hell, if they even have one of those guys in the lineup, I might even say like, come on guys, find a way to win 2 out of 3, but I'm not trying to lower the bar here for them. I just don't know what people are expecting.
No, you're right. And that's the thing, Bob. I'm going to, what can you expect from a team that is missing? I mean, let's be honest. The Phillies just got 7 guys named to an all-star team. The 8th, there's a chance that an 8th gets added in Sanchez if since Wheeler's probably not going to pitch. And in all honesty, had Real Muto not gotten hurt, he's probably the backup catcher. And Schwarber is the 3rd DH. Like if something were to happen to Ohtani or Ozuna, right? I mean, so you're missing 3 guys who were either all-stars or on the cusp of being all-stars from your lineup, and you had to throw a rookie pitcher in one game against still a pretty damn good Atlanta Braves team who's going to be in the playoffs this year. So, I mean, you got to pump the brakes a little bit, right? I mean, you really, really do. So you're spot on with that. That's not to say
even if you go inside the box score yesterday, top 5 hitters in the lineup, 1 for 17. Now that's not good enough. You can't have injuries, no injuries. You can't have their 5 top hitters in the lineup go 1 for 17. But I would then argue that those 5 spots are occupied by 3 players that wouldn't otherwise be in those spots. That is a direct, when the top of the lineup struggles to that degree, that is a direct reflection of what is going on with this team and its depth right now, and the amount of hurt that they face with these guys out of the lineup. I mean, that is what it is. Yeah, I mean, they were brutal yesterday, and you said runners in scoring position, 0 for 8. They were 1 for 5 on Saturday night. So they finished this series 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position. I mean, that's obviously not good, but you can't tell me that there's not at least some, I'll just use the word, excuse for it. You can be upset and you can be mad and be like, damn, they missed a chance. But like, to make anything more than that of what we saw, like, I can't get myself there, I guess.
No, and nor should you. I mean, in all honesty, it is what it is. Look, we've had these. I flash back to last year. It was about this time. Maybe it was just after the All-Star break. I forget when they played the Giants last year. And everybody's like, oh, they have this critical series coming against the Giants. This team is going to be a real telltale series because the Giants, they're going to be a potential playoff opponent. And it was middle of July, right? And the Phillies didn't have a great series against the Giants. Everybody was freaking out. And it was like, this Giants team stinks, right? I mean, they're not that good. Phillies are just where they are right now. It's okay. In the end, is this series going to make a difference? It's not. Let's not over amplify what these series are in the middle of the summer. Yeah, I mean, I still think that the matchups against Atlanta in August are going to probably have some meaning, and we'll get to those in a little over a month. But the reality of it is that both these teams were in unique situations this past weekend, and the Phillies just happened to be in a tougher spot probably than the Braves and lost 2 out of 3. Be happy that they got the 1.
Yeah.
In all honesty, be happy they got the 1, because if you lose all 3,
well, if you lose all 3, I think we're
having a different conversation.
Yeah, I think we're having a different conversation. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So be happy that they got the 1, and then let's see what happens here this week. Look, if this continues, even after Schwarber and Harper get back this week, and then Real Muto right after the All-Star break, because the schedule does tighten. toughen up a bit. I mean, yeah, the Dodgers, and then okay, you have the A's, but then it starts to get tough right after the break. I mean, that trip out of the break's not easy. They got some tough teams coming at the end of the month and in the beginning of August. Another long trip coming up after that. Like, this is going to get a little bit dicier schedule wise, and they're going to be challenged. But if they're healthy, I still think this team lives up to that challenge.
I do want to say this because we mentioned it on the show last Friday. Reynaldo Lopez talking about, hey, he's thrown a lot. Maybe they should take the foot off the gas on him. He's pretty damn good yesterday. I mean, he had only gotten through, I believe, 4 1/3 the previous start, 5 innings of the start prior. Like, you could see some of the oil leaking. There was no oil leaking yesterday. He dominated the Phillies for 6 innings. And so, maybe that's why Mark Bowman's not a major league front office exec or coach, talking about his piece and his premise last week about maybe they should sit him until after the All-Star break. The Phillies could not do much with him. Now, that all being said, Phillies are in a decent spot here. Like, let's not slam the panic button, but there are some things to talk about, and some of them aren't very good, to be honest with you. There's this idea that Ranger Suarez, NL Cy Young Award candidate, leader in the clubhouse probably through the 3rd week of June. And now his last 3 starts, he's really struggled. And keep in mind, he actually had given up 4 earned runs against the Tigers, but there was a scoring decision that was overturned that limited the damage, where his line reflects only 2 earned runs allowed in 6 innings against Detroit back on June 25th. That being said, he has allowed 15 total runs over his last 3 starts, 13 of which are earned. Opponents hitting 343 against him with a 973 OPS. Like, Ranger Suarez now, the last 3 times out, has not been particularly good. And I thought on Saturday he made a couple okay pitches and Atlanta still was able to do something with it, but he wasn't very good. Was admitted to the fact after the game. And I do kind of wonder, we know that he has now pushed so far past his workload to what he's accustomed to doing at this point in the season. Is this just a simple sign of fatigue? Fastball velocity is a little bit down, or are we seeing an adjustment here made by hitters that sort of suggests that, like, the book's out on Ranger Suarez, and not that he's going to become a bum, not that he's useless, but that maybe all the talk about looking at him blossoming into an ace or a really good number 2 type of starter, maybe we're not quite there yet with all of this.
Yeah, I'm not ready to say, he's not the guy he was in the first half of the season, and guys, the book is out on him. Although I want to ask this question before I give a real response, Bob, because yesterday, I'll admit it, I was down at the beach, sitting on the beach during the game. I had it on my phone. I was listening to the broadcast. The glare of the sun was a little tough on the phone, so every once in a while I could get a little bit of shade. I would be able to see the actual game, but I wasn't actually seeing a lot of it. And then I didn't stick around for the post game. Was there talk of Ranger potentially tipping pitches?
Yeah, I actually didn't watch the telecast yesterday. I watched a sped up version afterwards. I was not available during the actual game, but because we come on here and do the show, I just watch the sped up version of it. So I actually know what I'm looking at. But no, I don't know what they were talking about on the broadcast, but it almost felt like it. I mean, they were on him, and they were on him in some key spots. And what gets me, I think what kind of concerns me about it is we've seen this before. Like, we do this thing where we don't want to overreact and we don't want to jump to conclusions, and we always try to allow for some benefit of the doubt, try to be nuanced, try to be objective when you talk about this stuff. But Ranger Suarez would not be the first pitcher to come out of the gates where you're saying, wow, look at the jump he's made, or look at the season he's about to put together, and have a great first half followed by a mediocre second half. I mean, we've seen plenty of examples of this. So sure. I cannot come on here today and tell you that I know with absolute certainty that this is just a bump in the road, because sometimes I think that when you are critical, sometimes when you do present worry or say, here's a potential red flag, it sounds like an overreaction. Being critical is not always an overreaction. And I do wonder a little bit. Like, I know that he has a track record. I know that he's thrown a lot of big games for this team, that he's a good pitcher. But is he necessarily this guy that we were sort of not making them out to be the numbers of the numbers, but did we all get a little ahead of ourselves? And I don't think it's unfair to ask that question.
No, it's not unfair to ask that question. And it'll be, I think a real telling start will be the next one. He isn't going to pitch again until Oakland on, I guess, Friday night. He pitches against Oakland. And we'll get a real sense of where he is then. But I'll say this, Bob. I think that what the Phillies are going to do, I think that there's enough of a worry, and we brought this up on the last show. I had mentioned this was asked of Rob Thompson a little bit, both about him and Suarez and Sanchez, and they were concerned a little bit with the usage and the number of innings. They've never thrown as many innings. They're going to have to manage it a little bit better. And then you look ahead, and they, in August they play 28 games in 30 days, not a lot of off time. I think they're going to go to a 6-man rotation. But before we get to that point even, I really wouldn't be surprised if Ranger Suarez goes 5th coming out of the break. In essence, he would pitch Friday and then wouldn't pitch again until Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the following Tuesday after the All-Star break. So you're talking about probably a 10-day rest for Ranger Suarez. I think that reset would be good for him. Just kind of really, shut it down, not completely, but, do your bullpens, just kind of, get the arm loose again. But other than that, just kind of let's not throw game action for 10 days and see where you're at. I think it will do wonders for him and get him back on track. That's not to say that he's going to be sub 1.5 ERA again, Ranger Suarez, but can he be the guy that is an all-star caliber pitcher again in this rotation? I think so, 100%.
Here's the guy I want to talk about. Bryson Stott.
Okay, I'm a little surprised. I thought you were going to go somewhere else, but go ahead.
Well, we can talk about Michael Mercado, but I think
no. I thought you were going with another guy in the lineup.
I need to talk about Bryson Stott.
Okay, because I have another guy I want to talk about.
We've talked about Bryson Stott quite a bit here. We have done like a gentle, I would call it like a gentle criticism. Like, hey, you could be a little bit better. Here's the deal. We talk about like your guys stepping up when your stars are out. And Bryson Stott's not a star, but he is one of your guys. He's a core guy. And I've sort of been dancing around this like, hey, man, it would be really nice if he were to kind of get going here. And here we are now in July, 6 games. He's 5 for 24. So he's hitting 208 this month. He has a 546 OPS. He has 1 extra base hit in those 24 at-bats. If you go back to 3 previous games, you can tack on another 11 at-bats. So that's 35 at-bats. He's got 1 extra base hit over his last 9 games, roughly the span of time that Harper and Schwarber have been out. You go back even further, he has not hit a home run since May 18th. Like, I don't know, man. Like, he's hitting 240 this season. He doesn't put together offer after offer after offer, but there have been a lot of like 1 for 4s and 1 for 5s, and he's just not making an impact right now. And it's another one where it's like, I'm of the belief that he started to figure it out as a rookie, really built on that momentum last season. It looked like for a brief point in May that he was building on that and looked like he was about to sort of launch himself into this like fringe all-star space. That has not materialized though over the last, I guess now 7 weeks, 8 weeks. He's been a pretty ordinary player. He's not killing you, but he has not been anything that what I expected him to be this season. And I guess it's another case of we're trying to like thread this needle of, should you overreact? Should you be worried? Or is this baseball and just it ebbs and flows? And I sort of tend to lean on the idea that Ranger Suarez, like my projection of Ranger Suarez, even when things were at their best for him, was that he probably could be a number 2 option for you. Like when you talk about what a starter is, I think that Ranger Suarez is like a number 2 guy. Even if he won the Cy Young this year, I think over the offseason, I wouldn't have come into 25 being like, he's an ace. I would have said like, I need to see him do it again. I just don't I like guys that throw hard. I like guys that can just blow your doors off. And I know that's not his game, and I know that he's a tactician and that he has multiple pitches and he can dot, and like I get it. But I'm not all the way there on Ranger Suarez. That being said, I'm not panicked either about what I've seen the last few times out. Bryson Stott, like I am starting to just a little bit starting to wonder, like, is this just what this guy is? Is he like a 255 hitter? He's going to hit 11 homers for you in a season, play pretty good defense, and that's fine. But he's not this, like, he's not a guy that's going to make an all-star team. He's not a guy that's going to be considered one of the game's best second basemen. Like, are we running that risk with him, or is it more just a look, man? He's shown some really good stuff here. He's young. It's not always linear progression. It's all good. Like, where do you come in on him? Because I think he's been disappointing.
He has been underwhelming this year. I'm not out on him.
Is that semantics? Is underwhelming different than disappointing?
Well, I don't necessarily know if I'm completely disappointed, Bob, and I'll tell you why. I look around the game. And it's easy to sit here and just focus on what we have here in front of us in Philadelphia and say, this guy was trending in a certain direction and suddenly stopped trending in that direction. So therefore we're disappointed in him. Right. Mm-hmm. But I look around the sport and I just see that for whatever reason in baseball this year, this is a pitcher's year. Okay. And a lot of guys and a lot of star quality players are trending backwards for whatever reason in the sport. Yeah. Something has happened. There's been a shift, and we are in a very pitcher-friendly environment in the sport of baseball right now. And so when I look at the fact that Stott has taken that step back, he's not different than pretty much 90% of the league in that regard. And so while we would rather the linear progression be that he's continuing to become that next guy that to try and become the next version of Chase Utley for the Phillies, and he's not doing it. Of course, we get frustrated with that. But I look at it and say, okay, but if everyone else is not everyone, but almost everyone else is trending backwards a little bit, then I understand it. I'm underwhelmed by it, but I'm not disappointed in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, there are some things that can be said in his favor. We've talked about the revised approach with him. We're in a situation now where he's walked 39 times this year. He walked 39 times all of last year. I mean, we've seen him make a progression. His walk rate is almost double year over year. Like, he's become a more selective hitter. He's become a more disciplined hitter. But in doing so, it does feel like he's also given up some of the aggressive-ness that made, like, he hit 280 last year with an impact. So what I'm trying to figure out is, trying to figure out, Anthony, at the end of the day is his overall approach, which is more selective, and his on-base percentage is actually 332 this year versus 329 a year ago. So that's better. Does this help him in the long run become a more complete hitter? Is it more of a process to just get to the end result? It's like, all right, he showed one tool, and maybe that one's taking a step back, but now he's showing that a progression in another way, and eventually he gets to where he needs to be. Is that what we're seeing here?
I'm glad you brought it up that way, Bob, because I think so. I could be wrong, obviously. I mean, maybe not. Maybe he continues to trend in this direction, and this is what he is. But the comparison I'll make is a guy like Alec Bohm. Right. I mean, who we were all surprised by this year, the way he's hit. He's a guy who always had that great hit tool that you just said, man, if he could just figure something else out, just imagine what he could do with it. And then he has kind of figured it out, cut down on his chase rate. He's willing to go with pitches all over the field. He hits line to line, right? He's just become a complete hitter this year. And you got to remember, he's a little bit ahead of Stott as far as experience. So maybe you look at a guy like Stott and say all those things will come together for him, but it might not be this season. It might be next season or the season after. He's a year younger than Bohm, or 2 years younger than Bohm. So like I look at it and say, I still think that is still there. That kind of ability is still there. So again, that's why I'm underwhelmed. I wish it was you're getting more out of him, and then we'd have a lot more to be excited about when he steps to the plate. Because he's still, in my mind, the thing that bothers me is it's a lot of weak contact with him.
It really is.
It really just seems like it's just, he is just off. He hits those little bloops out to left field, and it gets under the ball a little bit, which is weird, like with that swing. And it's should be more of a line drive swing, should be a flatter swing through the zone. So, there are things like that bother me. But I also understand that it is a process for a younger player. And so therefore I give him the benefit of time. That doesn't mean that the spotlight shouldn't be on him, and that it shouldn't be harsher as the season progresses and we get towards games that really, really matter at the end of the season and in October. But at the same time, I understand that there is a process for a developing hitter, and I still think that he is a developing hitter.
Everything that I look at, I still just have this trust in him. You kind of attach your belief to a player. You're either in on a guy or you're out on a guy. And I've always felt like, even when he was going through it as a rookie, that he was going to figure it out. He had something different about him, and he's been a big moment guy for this team. And there's a lot to like about him. When you really dive in on him, though, it's like, I just don't know how to feel about it. Like you mentioned the selectivity, you talk about the plate discipline and how he's improving in certain areas. Then I look at like just the contact profile, like the average exit velocity is down, the barrel percentage is down. But then there's maybe are we just sort of a little bit too caught up in the end result, like around batting average? Like he hits 280 last year. His expected batting average per StatCast is 267 last year. His expected batting average per StatCast this season is 264. So even though the contact's been a little bit consistently weaker, it all kind of evens out when you look at it. And StatCast saying that this is the same hitter, except now he's walking more. So I guess like I think where I kind of come out, and as we go through this conversation, to say he has to be allotted more patience. I think in the end he gets to where we expect him to be. I just was hoping for a little bit more. And this would have been a really good week to see that happen, where he says, you know what, like the daycare thing, right? Like I very much would like to see that be retired. Like I kind of, Bryson Stott's 26 years old. Alec Boehm is 27 years old. Like daycare, like I know it was a very appropriate and fun in 2022. Like to me, I'm like, yo, Bryson, like, hey, Alec, and to Alec Boehm's credit, is doing this. Like, time to be the teacher, not the daycare student. Like, and I would have liked to have seen him. And I know it's narrative driven. Like, what's 1 week in July versus 1 week in August? Like, if he gets there, he starts going great. But this would have been a good time to get a little bit more out of him, and that did not happen this week.
No, it didn't. Although I didn't particularly hate his approach at the plate as a leadoff hitter in place of Schwarber. I really didn't. I kind of thought that I liked you saw some of the what we talked about, some of the growth in his change in approach was more on display as a leadoff hitter because he's the first batter of the game. And so you're really kind of, zoned in on what he's doing here. And I thought most of his at-bats had a good approach. It still didn't have the results. And I think that's where the tough spot really becomes, right? Are we talking about approach and just appreciating that, or do we sit there and say, okay, but we need the results? And I think that we're in that gray area where we want the approach to continue to be good, but we also want to start seeing results, and we're not getting to the results part yet.
Well, sometimes we jump all over the place in our topics, and it really works out. And you're like, wow, they were all over the map, but there was a good flow to it. Today, I'm just like, I'm all over the place. It's not really working out in terms of natural flow. I want to go back to pitching before we get to your guy in the lineup. Now I'm committing to being a mess. All right.
Really I love it. I love it. Improv was always one of my favorite things.
Yeah. What do the Phillies do with their number 5 starter? I assume that Michael Mercado will make another start before the All-Star break. Do you foresee them doing anything different here this week? Was that so bad yesterday, which it was so bad, but was it so bad yesterday that you aren't pitching against the A's next weekend? We don't need to see this ever again. Or what do they do with him? Because we were also talking a week ago about, hey, he impressed a lot of people this spring, and he's been really good in the minor leagues. Like, so I'm not ready to write a guy off after he gets bombed by the Braves in his second major league start. At the same time, that was horrible yesterday. So, like, how do you sort through this?
Well, I sort through it this way. My thing with Rob Thompson is I think he's a terrible poker player. And what I mean by that is that when Rob gives you a more, nuanced answer to a question, then he's comfortable talking about it. He's good with it, right? Whatever. But when Rob gives you a next to nothing answer on a question, it means that something's happening. And he said basically when he was asked about Mercado yesterday, he said, "Yeah, we're going to have to talk about it." Like, so what does that mean, right? Like, I think that means that they're going to make it. I think they're going to do something different. And I think.
But what did you say? Like, we said at the beginning of the week, if the Phillies go 3-3, you would take that.
Yeah.
If I would have told you Michael Mercado in his first major league start would go 5 innings, give up 2 hits and 1 earned run in Chicago, and do a pretty good job, and then he was terrible against the Braves, which, by the way, you sort of predicted. Like, this is sort of what we thought was going to happen. Maybe not as bad as it was yesterday, but like they've been pretty patient with a lot of guys. Like, he doesn't get a third start.
Well, it's not that I think that they're going to just suddenly send him back down again. What I think that you're looking at is a situation where maybe they flip it. Maybe they flip it and go with Tyler Phillips to start and Mercado as the long guy out of the pen. And that's the only thing that I'm thinking. Just to kind of put him into a situation where they can control when he comes into the game. And maybe it's pitching against the Cubs, whose lineup stinks, is one thing. And it's nice. He got into a little bit of a jam early. They hit the ball hard against him a couple times, but he got out of it. And then he ends up having 3 nice innings against the Cubs, and you're good with it, right? And then the Braves is a whole different animal. Even though the Braves offense has been struggling, it's still, you're talking about guys with a track record that can really take advantage of a pitcher if he's not throwing strikes. And they did. They took advantage big time. So maybe you look at it and say, okay, we still think there's something there, but let's just flip the script a little bit and put him into a more controlled situation and not have to where he has to absolutely perform for us. So I do think that that's what, when they say they're going to have to talk about it, because, Tyler Phillips,
Tyler Phillips was very impressive yesterday. Now, he was not pitching. He was pitching with a ton of pressure because he's in Philadelphia all of a sudden, with the Phillies, pitching against the Braves. It's a big spot for him in his career.
Correct.
No doubt. But in terms of the actual game situation, not a ton of pressure at that point. So I always say, like, a little grain of salt. Now, I agree with you. I did not think that, and I said this on Friday, I didn't think Michael Mercado was great against the Cubs. Like, I think that he did a nice job limiting damage, got into a little bit of a rhythm in the middle innings. But that start was a couple balls, a couple feet here and there away from being a much different outlook. So I'm not saying, wow, he was so electric in his first start. How can you just look at the box score in the second start and say, oh, we need to make a move? Like, I have no problem if the Phillies say, look, let's give ourselves the best opportunity to win in this last game before the All-Star break or whatever, hit this last start, the last time the spot in rotation comes up. Let's give ourselves the best opportunity to win. And that's not Michael Mercado. I can't argue with that. I wouldn't balk at that suggestion. I just look at it and go, like, I don't know. Do they just keep it status quo through the break and then sort of reset and reassess everything? The thing that got me about yesterday was that he didn't look prepared. He did not look ready mentally to execute in that game and give his team an opportunity. And he comes out, 4-pitch walk. And then he walks the second guy on 5 pitches. So 8 of his first 9 pitches are out of strike zone. To his credit, he comes back and he gets Riley. Olsen flies out. Then he walks Ozuna, which I don't really have a problem with, the way Ozuna's swinging the bat. And then he gets out of it on a line out to short. But then, the second inning, you're like, okay, maybe he settles down here. Maybe like he dodges the bullet and he kind of gets off the ropes and gives him a chance. But then it goes homer, single, homer. And then he settles down and gets Albies and Riley, and then gives him another homer to Olsen. Like, he just did not. He was bad in every way possible yesterday.
Yeah.
He made a bunch of bad pitches. He was wild. He was a mess. And I don't know. I don't know what you do with that. I think maybe what your suggestion, going to the bullpen with him, where I know he's gotten some starts here in the minor leagues and all, but I think it's just a situation where maybe you try to like let this guy take on less stressful situations, and maybe you get a better evaluation of what he has at the major league level, and then maybe expand the role moving forward if he seems to settle in and get into a groove. Maybe that is how you do it. Doesn't excuse the fact that the Phillies did nothing offensively yesterday, but it is hard to compete, I think, from an offensive standpoint when you go out and you blink and you just know, like, come on, we just got buried here. You're down 5-0 immediately. Some teams can chip away. Phillies are good at chipping away, but like yesterday, it felt like that game was over. I guess ultimately, it's just you watch a guy, he's non-competitive. The Phillies just didn't have an opportunity. Like sometimes you see a team get down 3 or 4 runs early, and you know that this game is just getting started. They have an opportunity to come back. Yesterday, to me, that game felt like it was over in the bottom of the second inning. Like he buried them yesterday. And so I want to get on the offense. They have to do better than 5 hits, no runs. That was not good enough, obviously, but I do wonder, just having seen that, if it's time to maybe dial it a little bit back with him, because it was a lot to give him. Hey, here you go, you're starting. Maybe you dial it back a little bit. Maybe you do flip to Phillips, and then you let this kid sort of do his thing and see what he has against major league hitters. And if he gets more comfortable, maybe you expand the role from there. Now, I do want to talk about Tyler Phillips real quick. I mean, did you see enough there yesterday? Obviously, we just talked about situationally, it wasn't a huge pressure situation. Did you see enough there to say, like, they might have something here? Or was this just a nice story that over the course of 162, you get stories like this, and he'll be gone in a month from now?
Yeah, it's a cute story to me, Bob. But I'm not just going to dismiss it as that. I'm going to say, hey, you don't come into your first major league appearance and strike out 7 guys. Like, this doesn't happen, right? I mean, it's the first time it happened in 125 years or something like that, whatever the hell it was. So you don't just that doesn't just happen. So I think that there's something you got to find out more about him. But at the same time, there's a reason he was in the minors for 7 years. His numbers in the minor leagues this year weren't like wow you numbers. They were just kind of mediocre. So you do have to pump the brakes a little bit, but at the same time, I'm willing to see if there's more there, to see if it translates at the at the next level. I mean, he came up and struck out the side in the middle of that order, in the first 3 batters he faced, and those were some good pitches too. I give him credit. Yeah, he gives up the 1 home run, but otherwise, I thought he pitched really well. And so, yeah, good on Tyler Phillips. I'm excited for him. It's great. You grow up in this area, you're a Phillies fan growing up, and now you get to pitch for your favorite team and all that good stuff. It's a great story. I'm willing to give it a little bit more of a runway and see what there is. It doesn't mean that I suddenly feel like there's we've unearthed something, here. Like I think it's one of those cute baseball stories, and hey, if it works out even more than that, all the better.
I'm with you on that. I want to look a little bit ahead this week to the Dodgers series specifically. But before we do that, you said you had a guy you wanted to talk about. So let's talk about him.
I do. And in the last 17 games, 15 starts, 17 games, Brandon Marsh has struck out 27 times. Mm-hmm. And he's been hitting cleanup.
So we're going in on Brandon Marsh again today.
Well,
we did a lot of Marsh last time out. That's why I didn't go here. But
but here's the thing, Bob. Like in 17 games, he has only not struck out. This is since he's come back from the injury. But he could go back. You could even go back 4 games further than that. So if you want to go to the last 4 games before the injury, then the injury, and then since he's come back, the only game he didn't strike out was the game he went 4 for 4 in Detroit.
Yeah,
that's it. Every other game he struck out at least once. He's got 9 games out of the 15 where he struck out multiple times in a game, including a 4 strikeout game also against Detroit, which was the day before his 4 for 4 game. But like even in the last, like just look at the last several games he's played. Miami, June 29th, 0 for 4, struck out twice. Miami, June 30th. Okay, he had 2 hits, but he struck out twice. The Cubs, 0 for 3, struck out twice. The Braves on Saturday, 1 for 4, struck out twice. Yesterday, 0 for 4, struck out twice. Like, you can't be striking out that many times, man. Like, that's my concern. He's still hitting 250, getting on base 344. The OPS is a little low at 701, but like, again, small sample. I'm okay with all that stuff. That part of it's fine. You can't be striking out that many times, especially when you're being asked to be in the middle of the order. Now, I know that once Schwarber and Harper and Realmuto get back, he's going to be back towards the bottom of the lineup. This isn't even about the lefty-righty thing. It's more about the fact that it doesn't matter who's pitching. The guy is just not making contact enough, and that's my concern.
Hard to argue. I gave a lot of Brandon Marsh thoughts the other day. I agree. We look at it and we focused a lot about the splits, but he's certainly going through it right now a little bit as well. And I think it kind of ties back into the conversation we had late last week, which is, you see the deficiencies in the outfield. We all know it now. How do you address it? What is Brandon Marsh? What are you doing in center field? And it sort of transitions to one thing that I wanted to get to before we talk about this Dodger series real quick. And you may have seen it. Tim Kelly, Phillies Nation, our guy, he writes about a story where you had Jim Bowden. He was on his MLB Network radio show, and I don't know how plugged in Jim Bowden is actually these days. Sometimes I think you see Jim Bowden stories and you kind of go like, this is nonsensical. But then sometimes you say like, the guy's a little bit plugged in. So what does he know? And he's now saying that the Phillies are pretty comfortable with their starting rotation, pretty comfortable with the bullpen. Maybe they add, but it's all about center field. They need to figure out center field. And he mentions Robert, Jazz Chisholm, and then Cody Bellinger, who we talked about and then quickly dismissed last week once we looked into the contract and we said, never mind, I don't want to get tied up in that. But he mentions those three guys as being possibilities for the Phillies. After he had a couple days to think about the Bellinger thing, and I guess we could talk about Robert and Chisholm as well, like, are you in? Like, I heard Amaro a couple weeks to say that Jazz Chisholm is not a fit for Philadelphia. He said there's no shot it's going to happen, won't fit in the clubhouse. So if that's the reality of it, is this just Bowden saying, well, these guys are available, they have a deficiency, I'm just going to link them together, and because it kind of makes some sense on paper?
I think it makes sense because you look at those teams and you say, okay, we know the White Sox are selling, we know the Marlins are selling, the Cubs are a maybe sell, right? So if they were to sell, who would they sell?
Yeah.
And so I look at it and say, well, okay, well, maybe they move on from Bellinger because, that it is what it is. They could probably get a good return for him. And we looked at the contract and we didn't like it. And I think that that's Bowden probably saying, he probably talks to a lot of people and say, well, who are you hearing? Who are you hearing? And you link together, oh, well, the Cubs might move Bellinger. Well, the Phillies need a center fielder. Let's put those two together. But if you really dive into it deeper, I can't imagine that that's their primary target, again, because of the contract situation that we're talking about, right? So I think that's kind of how a lot of these things come together. I do think Bowden's plugged in. I know kind of how this works. Obviously I deal with it in hockey a lot, but I kind of know how the backdoor conversations at a national level work. And so I don't think that he's just pulling stuff out of the air, but I do think that there is some puzzle piecing that does take place sometimes. And I think it's informed, but not, directly informed, if that makes sense.
What if a team called the Phillies and said, yeah, we'll give you that difference maker. You know who we want? We want Brandon Marsh.
I mean, yeah.
You do that? You worried about the clubhouse ramifications of that? I do not think, full disclosure, that this has any chance of happening. But it's not as preposterous of a suggestion as it seems. I mean, he's a good player. He's still on the younger side. There could be more to him. If I were a team, I'd look at him and say, like, I'd be interested in him.
Yeah, he's pretty good against right-handed pitching. I mean, he really is. When you
have him tied up, you have 3 more years of arbitration eligibility with him through his age 29 season. Like, if you're a team giving away a right now piece and you want something meaningful that you can sell to your fan base in return, Brandon Marsh would be that guy. Now, don't misconstrue my point here. I'm not saying that Bob Wankel in the latest episode of Crossed Up says that the Phillies should trade Brandon Marsh. Like that's not what I'm saying, but everyone, you know the deal here.
I hope Russ hears that so he doesn't, he doesn't clip it and put it out there in a clip.
But everyone wants to get the difference maker and doesn't want to hurt in exchange for it. So it's like, well, I want a difference maker, but I don't want to give up Aiden Miller. I'm not giving up Painter. I'm not giving up. And nor you shouldn't want to give up those guys, but sometimes to make that move, you got to do something that hurts a little bit. So I look at Brandon Marsh and say, this would be a guy I would circle. I don't know.
Yeah, Bob, and I think that if the Phillies end up failing, I'm going to say something here that's going to get me in trouble. If the Phillies end up failing,
spicy.
No, if they end up failing with this. It well could be because they clinged too much to the clubhouse culture.
Okay. I like that.
And I say that not because I think that they should change it, because I don't. I'm a guy who believes in that stuff, right? And we talk about intangibles on this show all the time. But I think that if you have that opportunity to go get that difference-making player, and you choose not to remove a piece from your current roster because you didn't want to upset that apple cart, then I think that could be a situation where, and it ultimately comes back to hurt you. I mean, there's a lot of ifs there, right? Then I think that ultimately could be a thing that you go, yeah, man, that was a missed opportunity, and you shouldn't have let it happen. But I'm not saying that that's going to happen.
On the next Crossed Up, Anthony defends his take why the Phillies should trade Brandon Marsh.
There you go.
You like that? I saw your antenna go up when I said that. You're like, ooh.
Well, it's interesting to me because I like Brandon Marsh. I like him as a player. I do think there's more there.
So I agree.
And I think that
if I were the Chicago White Sox, I'd be interested in Brandon Marsh.
Yeah. And so, to me, yeah, Bob, but I have to think about it. I have to consider it because this is about winning right now.
Yeah.
And if you need to make that move. So the one thing I will say this about Dombrowski, since he's gotten here, he's done things a little bit differently than he's done everywhere else in the sense that he hasn't traded away prospects. I get it. Yeah. Okay. You traded away O'Hoppe. All right, fine, but you needed to do that, and he was blocked at the position by Real Muto. He was never going to be a catcher here. So okay, fine, but other than that, he hasn't really moved prospects, which is what he did everywhere else he's been. He's traded the prospects to bring in the veterans to make his teams win, and he's been successful doing that. He's done something that's allowed the Phillies to be a little bit more sustainable as far as competitiveness, and that is keep the prospects, sign some free agents, spend John Middleton's money, and then be smart about how he strikes when the iron's hot. But I think that this is a different kind of season. And in this season, he may need to strike a little bit more hotter than he usually does, than he's done so far with the Phillies.
Let me give you one more, and then we'll table this for now.
Yeah.
You have the framework for, give me the player that you'd like to see the Phillies bring in. Like this guy, we keep saying difference maker, super vague. I don't know who it is on my end. Who do you think that guy is?
I mean, I believe in the ability of Luis Robert. I know he hasn't had a good season, but I mean, that's a guy. You look at what he is and what he can be. That's a huge piece, man.
Perfect. Thank you. You walked right into this. So that's your return. Now the Phillies put together the framework of a trade package, and in it, you have, I don't even know what the package looks like, but let's just say that the final piece of it is outfielder. And the Phillies have the option to either put in Justin Crawford or Brandon Marsh to get this done across the finish line. What would you do?
And both get it. Either one gets it done.
That last spot of the trade package is what finalizes it. And Chicago says, you know what? We're getting what we want out of this. You can either send us Brandon Marsh or you put in Crawford, and we'll accept this trade.
Crawford. I'll keep the known quantity and get rid of the unknown quantity.
I wonder
if I'm given that option.
I wonder if you polled the Phillies executives, with the truth serum, what they'd say. I wonder if you pulled the fan base, what they'd say. I would imagine they'd say Crawford for the same reason that you just said, which is two things. One, there's a known commodity here. We know what he can do. And then also the dynamics and the intangibles part of it. You're not messing with that either. Interesting though, right? Like kind of interesting.
So here's why it's more interesting than maybe people realize.
If Justin Crawford's not a better player in 3 years than Brandon Marsh is right now, like that's a disappointment, by the way. 55th overall prospect, they're third best. Justin Crawford, if Justin Crawford's not better than Brandon Marsh 3 years from now, like that's a miss.
Yeah. I'll tell you one other reason why it's a real interesting proposal that you put together. And what most fans probably don't realize is these very conversations that we're having right now are had on the daily internally. And you'd be stunned by some of the names that get thrown into conversations about trades. Guys you would never trade, but you still think about it. You still talk about it. You still discuss it. Like the thing that drives me the most crazy is to think that any executive, even if the ones that don't do a good job as general managers or presidents of their sports team, that they don't take time to actually think things through or prepare. They may make the wrong decision. They may not ultimately make a good trade or whatever the case might be, but there is a lot. And when I say a lot, there is a lot of back and forth internally. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of playing the game of what if this and what if that. Like it all happens, man. And it happens a lot. So I would not be surprised if Dombrowski and Sam Fuld and the rest of the Phillies scouts and everything, they're weighing these options back and forth.
Here's another one. Do you think at some point some team isn't looking at what the Phillies have right now and saying, all right, they have Edmundo Sosa, who they could probably play every day at second base if they wanted to. Then let me see what they have coming. All right. They have Aiden Miller, who I kind of think ends up being a third baseman, but shortstop capability. And by the way, they also have that Kaba kid. So 2 of their top 5 prospects right now are infielders, and one is a dead red shortstop. So now Bryson Stott is arbitration eligible through the 2027 season. You don't think that there's a team right now saying, hey, Phillies, you want to have a conversation? Let's talk a little bit about Bryson Stott. Now, to us, we'd say, like, no way, no shot. And I don't think the Phillies, I would be absolutely floored if the Phillies traded either A, Brandon Marsh, or B, Bryson Stott. They feel like win now, right, guys? They're vital to the operation, intangibles, the whole nine. But you're telling me that there isn't at least probably someone asking about it, and the Phillies, maybe at least for a millisecond, thinking, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that those conversations happen. I say on the regular. On the regular, they happen between teams. It just is a thing. And yeah, of course, you're going to probably shoot it down 99.999% of the time. But yeah, you're right, Bob. You would not be doing your job properly if you didn't at least think about it and discuss it internally. You would be negligent in your position. So that's why I like the fact that you brought it up as a proposal, because I do think those kinds of conversations happen all the time, and we just had one. Well, we decided we wouldn't trade Brandon Marsh, but the reality of it is that we had the conversation about it.
I know that we're running up against our time here. I want to talk about the Dodgers. We can skip it. The Phillies should win 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers this weekend. That's where I'm at. You look at who they're throwing. You look at who the Dodgers are throwing. Betts is out. You should get Schwarber back minimum. Maybe you get Harper later this week. I don't know. You should win the series. That's pretty much my. We could have done 8 minutes on it. That's the take for me in 20 seconds.
This is going to be a good week for the Phillies in my mind. I really do believe it. I think that they're going to go into the break strong. I think they're going to be the big conversation piece at the All-Star break with 7 guys there. And I think that they're going to have a little bit of momentum going in.
I got 5-1 this week, Anthony.
Yeah, I do too. I think that they're going to sweep Oakland and to Oakland's credit, they're not the pushover team they were a year ago. They're a little bit more competitive. I mean, they scored 19 runs in a game twice already this year. Once against the Orioles, no less, right? So I mean, they're a little bit better than maybe you think, but at the same time, I think that this is a shove week for the Phillies after what just happened, and there can be a lot of momentum with Schwarber Harper coming back. I think this is a good week for them. I agree with you. I think it's 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers and a sweep of the Oakland A's.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. All right, one last thing. We'll get out of here.
So one last thing was originally going to be about the trade deadline as well. I'm going to modify it slightly since you already brought up the Bowden stuff. Interesting thought was that the defending champion Texas Rangers, they're 42-48. And they've been a little bit better lately. They swept Tampa. They've won 5 out of 7. They're still 7.5 out. So there's a thought that they might end up selling some people. I'm going to give you one more name to think about
Okay.
if you're the Phillies, because it's not center field per se that this guy replaces because he can't play center field. But again, if you're going to go with a Marsh, maybe Marsh Rojas platoon in center field and get away with it, any interest in Adolis Garcia for left?
Oh yeah, let's go. Yeah, I mean, he talk about difference makers. I mean, he was a monster last year. He was the difference maker for them. Him
not having a good year at all for the Rangers.
I know.
215. Yeah,
hit top. I mean, he's tripped into 16 homers. He's going to hit 30 homers in a down year. Yeah.
I'm just curious if a guy like that who's done it on the big stage, he is an older player. He's 31, right? Does that interest you as a kind of a guy to plug into the middle of your lineup, who could potentially make that lineup deeper and you get away and you go with a platoon situation in center?
Yeah, and he's not terribly expensive.
Right.
So, and you have, I believe, control through 26. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, 26. So, yeah, I mean, that would be a guy I'd be interested in. And the Rangers should blow it up. Like, maybe not blow it up, but the Rangers might need to strip a little bit.
Yeah.
That team as constructed is not going to get back, and I don't think we'll get back next year either. All right, well, look, I know we're at our time here. So for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. Make sure you're checking us out anywhere that you get your podcast and on YouTube, and we'll talk to you later this week.